Hello everyone and welcome to this session. My name's Sarah Ratcliffe and I'm the chair for this session, and I'm delighted that you've all been curious enough to come along and find out a little bit more about both why Simon and Stefan believe that curiosity is what really makes a big difference. So I'm delighted to introduce your speakers today. We've got Simon Brown from Novartis, and we have got Stefaan van Hooydonk from the Global Curiosity Institute. Now, to kick off this session, we really want to know from you what you think the benefits of curiosity are in learning. So please take a moment, have a think, turn to the person next to you, and just discuss what those benefits are to curiosity and why they make such a difference in learning. Thank you. Okay. Judging by the noise in the room, you certainly are a curious bunch. So let me get some examples. Perhaps you can just give me a little bit of a wave if you had a great conversation and you absolutely believe that curiosity has great benefits. Let's just have a look. Who's going to talk to me? What benefits? Or I'm just going to come and get some people here. Who's going to tell me some of those benefits? Thank you.
Thank you. We were talking about the value of curiosity both as a learner but also as the creator of learning. So ideally, when you're producing learning content, you want to ignite some curiosity in the learner so that they go on and then they want to learn more. And that's the dream we're all working towards, right? So there is that element, and there's also actually, if you're curious yourself, then that kind of links in with that growth mindset element that we were talking about a lot yesterday and this morning. And that has so much value and just means that we can push ourselves forward to produce things that bring value to our organisations and ourselves, and hopefully the world moving forward.
Thank you. Well, judging by their faces, you've made them very happy there. Anyone else like to share with me very briefly? Everyone's looking the opposite way. Oh, brilliant. I don't know how I can get along there, but we'll pass it along quickly.
Thank you. It's actually my colleagues' input, but I think it's so good, and it's about internal motivation. Because curiosity, if you have that curiosity, you have that internal motivation to learn, and then it really, really drives the learning impact, I think.
Thank you very much. Some great comments there to set you off and get you everyone even more curious. So, Simon, over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. There's a good start. So, does it feel to you like maybe the world is getting faster? That things are speeding up and it's hard to keep up with it all? Probably sounds quite familiar to everyone. A few data points that back that up. So, actually, when we wrote the book just 2 years ago, 19% of the current skill set that we have today will be irrelevant in 3 years' time. That's actually changed now. Latest data is over a quarter of the skills that we all have today will be irrelevant in 3 years' time. So just pause for a moment and just think, a quarter of the skills you're relying on day in, day out, irrelevant in just 3 years. And at the same time that those skills are going to be irrelevant, there's new skills coming as well. And nearly half of people have learnt a new-to-world skill in the last 3 years. So a new-to-world skill being something that didn't exist before. Maybe something like bot management, drone pilot, some of these things that actually are now skills that are in the workplace and weren't around before. So you've got skills expiring, you've got new skills coming, and the World Economic Forum tells us that actually half of our employees are going to need reskilling, which is quite a scary statistic for those of us in learning and development. And at the same time, we're seeing how our organizations are structured changing as well. We see the pyramid shift. We see no longer the hierarchy, command and control from the top, that all decisions have to go to the top. Actually, people are getting more empowered, as we would talk about at Novartis, more unbossed, in order to be able to delegate decision-making and actually give people the autonomy to make decisions. So in that context of things changing, how do we all stay relevant? How do we keep up with it all? You won't be surprised to know that the answer, we feel, is curiosity. And both Stefan and I have independently come to the conclusion that actually that's the answer. What do we mean, though, by curiosity? So When we wrote the book, the definition we came up with is curiosity is having an attitude of wonder with a spirit of exploration. Thinking about things, wondering about things, but that's not enough. We have to then put that into action with that spirit of exploration. So why should we be curious? So you just came up with some fantastic benefits. Let me give you a few more. So firstly, we're wired for curiosity. So our brains are actually geared up to be curious. We get rewarded for curiosity. When we're curious, it fires dopamine in our brain, the reward drug, and we actually get a buzz from being curious. But also, to one of the points that you shared, actually curiosity helps us to learn better. And there's two sides to that. There's the piece of actually motivating you to learn. But interestingly, research from the University of California actually showed us that if you invoke curiosity when you learn, it actually creates stronger pathways and you actually retain the information more. So if you're curious when you learn, you will actually retain the information better. Also, research by Francesca Gino in the Harvard Business Review found that curiosity actually helps us make better decisions. So if we're curious, we think through different decision outcomes, and we weigh up the pros and cons of those decisions, and we actually make less decision-making errors. So it actually helps us improve our decision-making. Also found that it actually reduces conflict in a team. So if someone has a different opinion, rather than wonder, what's going on there, actually, I'm curious. What am I missing out? What do they know that I don't know? So be curious, not furious. It boosts our communication skills. So we actually listen better if we're curious. We want to understand the point that someone else is making. We're more attentive, and we actually retain more of what people are saying. Research by Spencer Harrison at INSEAD also found the connection between curiosity and innovation. If we're curious, we're more creative, and actually that leads to greater innovation. He did some fantastic research across CEOs, across many large companies, and found actually the more curious CEOs and advisors had longer sustained business success than those that were less curious. It also helps us to manage through change. Also, research from Francesca Gino looked at the proportion of people before the pandemic and during the pandemic that reported themselves to be curious. Before the pandemic, 20% of people in organizations said they were curious. Did the same research again. During the pandemic, that had fallen to 15%, which is quite worrying that so few. More worrying, though, is those that did report that they were curious reported that they were able to better cope with stress, that they suffered from less burnout, they were able to have more meaningful relationships. So the importance of curiosity in coping through those times of stress is key. And finally, it's good for your well-being. It actually supports that lower stress. It actually nurtures the vagus nerve, actually improves our well-being. So if there's all of those benefits, then how do we actually become more curious? You'll be pleased to know we've got some suggestions for how you can be. We did a whole load of research, myself and my co-authors of the book, looking at all of the different ways that we can build our curiosity. And we came up with a model that we call the 7 C's of curiosity. We had to play around a little bit to get 7 that began with the letter C, but it gives us a great analogy around discovery and exploration. So what are the 7 C's? I won't go into them in huge detail today. If you've got more that we can go into in the questions as well. But we start with context. So the first of our C's, context, understanding the context that we're in, the context around us, and what it is that we're curious about. If we don't understand the context, how can we know what's going on? How can we know what we need to learn? A great example is in the book Sense Making, where there's a description of if you imagine a swan, imagine a white swan, and you now shine a red light onto that white swan. What do you see? You see a red swan. You're not seeing a red swan, you're seeing a white swan with a red light on it. Without the context of the red light, you would swear what you were seeing was a red swan. So the same thing, whatever it is we're curious about, if we don't understand what's going on around it, we don't understand the context, we may think we're seeing something, but actually we're not understanding it. So second of our C's is community. So being curious is not something to be done alone. Being curious needs a community. And there are people in that community that can help us on our way. There are the gatekeepers that can unlock information for us. There are the wise that can share their wisdom. There are the technical experts that can share what they know. So finding that community will help us in our curiosity. The problem with that community is they give us loads of information, which then means we need to whittle that down to what's actually going to matter most for what it is that we're curious about. Our next C, curation. So how do you filter through all of the noise to the things that really matter for what it is that we're curious about? And then we've filtered that down. We know what's important. What can we bring to it? What creativity can we bring? What questions can we ask? How can we push things forward to discover things that haven't been done before? That's where creativity comes in. Questions that we ask, but questions aren't enough. It's great to be asking questions, but we need to then test those out, which is then our next C, construction. So putting into practice, experimenting, trying things out, prototyping, and seeing what results we get. And these two together, this creativity coupled with construction, we call the curiosity engine, and it's right at the heart of the model. When we do experiment, we then get results, and looking at those results in an unbiased way is where we need criticality. So what are the results actually telling us? Is it confirmation bias? I'm just seeing what I expected to see here. Being really critical and seeing what it tells us is going to be key. And then through all of that, regardless of whether our experiment is successful or not, it actually builds our confidence. So even if we fail through there, we actually end up more confident at the end of it. And confidence could be our 7th C, but it could also be our 1st C, because if we're more confident, we can go back through the process, we can be more bold in our creativity, we can ask bigger questions, try bigger experiments, and end up in a virtuous circle. So when we apply that into an organization, when an organization chooses to be curious, what is it that actually happens? Within Novartis, back in 2019, I went in front of our exec committee to make the case for why we should go big on learning. And this was the slide we used. 2 reasons. One, to invest in learning, to support our culture of curiosity and attract and retain the best talent. So invest for the benefits of associates. And we had a whole range of data points around internal and external, why people join companies for learning, stay with companies for learning, and will leave if they don't get access to great learning. And then as well as investing for attracting and retaining the best talent, there's a second piece around supporting the business strategy. So looking at our strategy, 5 pillars of what we have in our company strategy, there's a whole set of skills that we need. And we need to get great at learning in order to be able to build those skills, whether that's operational excellence, whether that's data and digital. Those skills are needed to support that strategy. And we saw earlier the data around expiring skills, new skills coming. So to be able to deliver on that strategy, we need to get great at learning. And then there's this sweet spot in the middle where actually many skills are the skills that people want and the skills that the company needs. So something like data science would be a great example that's right in the sweet spot. People would join an organization to build their data science skills, stay with an organization getting hot skills around data science, and the company needs data scientists. So fortunately, they agreed with our ask to support going big on learning, to support our culture around inspired, curious, and unbossed. And for the last 3 years, some of the team here, we've been working to build access to great learning across the company. That includes access to great content. It includes improving our systems to make it easy to find that content and have a great user experience. And looking at learning broadly, so not just content, but actually looking at a very wide range of learning opportunities. We want to give everyone access to that great opportunity to learn and develop. How do we do that? A whole host of different things. Bad news, there's no silver bullet around just one thing that you do in order to build a curious culture. One of the things we did was a series of campaigns over the last few years. It started with I Am Curious in 2019. We had a Curiosity Month, a whole month in September dedicated to curiosity. That evolved into We Are Curious in 2020, and last year into Curious Together. Back in 2020, we had a whole host of events that went on across the company. We were expecting with the pandemic that it was actually going to be a lot less than previous years, but actually we ended up reaching a lot more people with a lot more excitement. We introduced a whole series of badges, so as people attended one of several hundred webinars over the course of the month, you were awarded badges, and we had a Curiosity Champion badge for people who attended 10 webinars or more. And fairly quickly, we found that 10 webinars was not enough, that we had people attending 20 webinars, and we had to create a whole new badge for people who were even more curious than we actually expected. This also then went viral. It was on our internal social media. There was 1,600 mentions on Yammer. It was at the bottom of people's email footers. It was everywhere. It was generated real excitement around curiosity. And then last year, that evolved further. 78,000 learning hours, reaching 26,000 associates across the company. And last year, we actually took it from being a month of September into actually being a year. Feedback from our associates was, we don't just want a month where we get excited about learning. We want to spread those events across the whole year and be able to take place whenever it happens in the year. 250 hours nearly of original content reaching people in 99 countries. So what was the impact of all of that? When we set out to go big on learning and be curious, we actually set an aspiration around 100 hours of learning, 5% of people's time. An aspiration, not a target, we use that word carefully. And it wasn't a scientific target, it was just, we wanted to very clearly say the company supports learning and address the barriers that we had. We were on 22.6 hours of learning at that point. We'd seen 3 years of declining learning hours. That was the point where we started on the curiosity journey, and as you see from the graph, we had now more than the doubling of the amount of time spent learning. Whether you like learning hours or not, there's a whole discussion we can have on the value of learning hours, but actually people spending time on great content, building skills, and I can share other data around that, we feel is valuable. So last year we were on 52.1 hours of learning per associate, so more than doubling across that 3-year period. If we then look at actually the impact of that and where people are spending that time, they're spending it on things that align against our strategy. They're spending it on time around data science, they're spending it on time around leadership. It's subjects that matter and are important to support what we're doing as a business. And then we can look at our skills data as well. I know these are hard to read, but as an example, if you take data visualization, this is our skills level in data visualization versus the industry. And what we see back 2018, we were behind the industry on our benchmark around skills for data visualization. And actually over time, we've been able to overtake the industry benchmark, and we see that in a number of skills. So we know that the time is being spent on things that matter, and we know it's actually having an impact on the skills that people have across the company. If we go back to our business case as well, it wasn't just around building skills that the company needs to support the strategy, it was also around attracting and retaining talent. So if we look at our engagement scores, we do a quarterly pulse survey, normally about 75,000 people take part in it. We started 2 points behind the benchmark at 68 back in 2018. We've seen a gradual increase to the point at the end of last year where we were 4 points above the benchmark on engagement on the question of I have great opportunities to learn and grow. Also, very nice that we picked up a bunch of awards along the way. That's great for us as a team, but why that's more important, go back to the business case, we wanted to attract and retain talent. The attraction piece means people need to know there's great opportunities within the company. And we've asked everyone that's applied to join the company, what was it that inspired you to apply to join? Number one reason across over 1 million people, the opportunities to learn and development. So it's working on that attraction metric, it's working on the engagement for that retention metric, it's working on that building the skills to support the business strategy. We also see very positive improvements in our ESG scores as well. We see it in our annual reporting pack now, where there's a whole load of information around the progress that we're making on learning and the investments that we make. With all of that, the conclusion at the end of the book, in case you don't want to spend the time reading it, the final chapter at the end is, if you do want to be curious, to question is the answer. And now Stefan will share some more thoughts around curiosity.
Whoa. Actually, I am where Simon was 2 years ago. My book is launching on Monday. And I'm completely anxious for it all. And Simon has been sharing some of his experiences around doing that. Actually, I've been a serial chief learning officer for quite a number of companies, like chief for Philips, for Cognizant lately, and some other companies. And what I found actually, and that's my first thing, and we're all people in learning, I think, no? Who is not in learning here in the room? So I don't think anybody, there's one person I see here. We all have people we're all serving people in our teams. And what I've noticed in observing many of our colleagues, some people are just people that we don't need to serve. They're learning all the time. They're always ahead of the game. They'd love to join our programs because they're naturally interested in it, but actually they don't need it. And I ended up calling them A players. And then you have B players. B players are people that want to learn, want to grow, but they miss something. They need a manager, or they need a marketing campaign, or they need something to get going. And I started thinking to myself, what are these A players, and what constitutes, and what is the magic behind this? And is this something that is arriving from birth, or is that something that can be trained? And I've started kind of reflecting and thinking and looking at the research around what constitutes such an A player. And I found a number of things. First of all, A players are what I call confidently humble. They have a continuous humility around them. They're going deep into specialization, but they're also learning broadly. They're also productively curious. They're not only coming up with ideas, but they're also first in line to help solve the ideas that they have or do something with the ideas they have. And also thinking a little bit further, what are these A players? And then I realized actually A players is a state, is something that people don't have all the time. When people get into companies, especially grown-up companies, what is happening, companies are trying very hard to make you a B player. So companies spend all this energy and all these resourcing dollars or euros on recruiting the best of the best, and then we're pushing people into conformity. And also while managers are saying that they want to have the best of the best, actually very often, or some of the managers actually prefer B players, people that listen and not people that challenge, you know? And so that's what was my journey, and I left basically my cushy job as a Chief Learning Officer. I set up the Global Curiosity Institute about 2 years ago. Now, when I was at my last company, we did the beauty with having a team of 300,000 people is you can do some pet projects. So we launched a series of programs around learn to learn, growth mindset, and also curiosity. And we trained 15,000 people. We started as a small project with 15,000 people in a 45-minute short online session around the power of curiosity, talking about neuroscience, how the brain can change, neuroplasticity and that stuff, giving them some reflection opportunities and also some strategies to do something. What we suggested with the individual contributors is share it with somebody else. At home, in your team, doesn't matter, but share what you've learned with somebody else. And for the managers, please try to replicate it into your team. Or tell them what you've learned and what you're planning to do with it. And then, 3 months later, we checked in with those people, and we asked the question, does something resonate, yes or no? And you could see here about the huge majority of people, they were actually waiting for this. They're saying the seed that you've planted, and we might have lost it a little bit, that curiosity, but the seed that you've planted actually was resulting in something beautiful. And then beauty that our research team, our analytics team, they did some extra research 1 year later, and they were comparing the learning hours. Like Simon said, we can debate the validity of learning hours, but we checked their consumption patterns of the learnings that we're having. And they had jumped from 25 hours to 43 hours for those people who were accepting that little seed. So that gave me the proof that you can actually train and you can change and you can motivate people into curiosity if you're intentional about this. Now, I think we all know this Sir Ken Robinson, and he was actually making the case that schools kill curiosity. And I've been trying to get my head around and asking the questions, do organizations kill curiosity? You have startups, and I think startups are very good in exploration, maybe not so good in the scalability of things, but by the time startups become scale-ups and become grown-ups, very often the exploration mindset is leaving the building. And then you need intentional effort, like for instance what is happening at Novartis, saying, hey guys and girls, time out, we have to start refocusing on the skill that we might have lost. And then I've been looking and doing quite a number of hacks. I have access to research, but also do research myself, where I've got a couple of diagnostics. And this is what I found. Also, these A players often are the minority in organizations. 24% of people in our organizations feel regularly curious at work. Or if you're comparing startups with grown-ups, startups are 4 times more ready to learn from mistakes than grown-ups. So that means that grown-ups are not really learning from mistakes as much as they could. If you're looking at perspective, if you're asking leaders, most of the time leaders say, and actually also learning and development people are saying, we're good at this. But when you're asking the people in the teams, then people are not so sure about it. So it's all about what filter you're putting in front of it. Of course, leaders are creating the culture, the environment, and they feel much more ownership towards the people on the receiving end, a little bit less. Interestingly also, for the changing dynamic of curiosity, if people are 3 years in the same role, their curiosity level goes down. They become part of the furniture. So that's maybe the case for job rotation. Keep people fresh. Or what PepsiCo has been doing, they have this marketplace for part-time jobs. If people feel that they have some extra energy and they're sitting in learning and development, they could work in marketing for half a day a week and contribute and learn and stay fresh at the same time. Interestingly also, there has been a huge growth year on year in the use of the word curiosity, and that's specifically for LinkedIn now, in job ads. So the world is picking up something that has been an early adopter thing. More and more companies are looking at this. Because actually, I think the question is the answer. It all starts with a simple question, no? What if, what? And it has been basically the driver of our society, of relationships, of our organizations. We all started with this question. And the interesting thing with this question is often it starts at the early stages of something. When we start a new project, or when we start a new relationship, or we start a new job. You joined last October, I think, no? That's where the curiosity is happening, in the early stages of things. And by the time we become used to the environment, we stop asking questions, and we stop being curious. The only area which you refer to, motivation, if people are intrinsically motivated, it doesn't go down curiosity. It grows all the time, because people realize that they don't know what they don't know, and they keep on going. That's why it's so important for us as learning and development people, I think, to drive intrinsic curiosity, and to shy away from the compliance type of stuff. Because compliance never gets innovation and excitement. It's the curiosity that gets it. Maybe also a thing on the questioning. There's some research done in the UK about how many questions kids ask. Here in the UK specifically, well, I think it's pretty global. What do you think? The number of questions a young child asks on a daily basis? Over 100. Over 100? 4,000? Well, actually, people on average only use about 400 words on a day, different words at least. It's 73. And then by the time kids get into adolescence, their questions are in single digits, depending on what tribe they're part of. Because in some parts of society, it's cool to ask questions, and families. In some families and parts of society, it's not cool. And then by the time we get into corporate world, we ask functional questions. What do I do to stay out of trouble? What do I do to fit in? What do I do to please my boss? And then also a question, I think, what questions our management is asking is very important. Is our management, if we're sitting with our CEO, are we feeling uplifted because he or she is interested in us? Or are we feeling checked on? Is this manager asking questions, kind of the difference between listening to fix or listening to learn? So that's an interesting dynamic, I think. Curiosity, also very interesting, has attraction and distraction. Until the 1950s, roughly, curiosity was a bad thing. Curiosity was something for nosy kids, was linked to gossip. In the Polish language, anybody from Poland here? I was told by a lady from Poland that there is this saying in Polish, curiosity is the first step to hell. And in French we say curiosity, too much curiosity kills. And many languages have this negative connotation still stemming from the way back. I've got an entire chapter on the history of curiosity and what we think about curiosity. And then on the right-hand side, we have the positive dimension as it links to innovation, to discovery, to exploration, to research, which more and more companies are embracing now. When I said that curious people, these A players, not only want to have a good idea, but also want to implement it, it's the first one. I ask often people, what does a curious professional look like? And that's a curious is more likely to, and they have a choice about 14 different answers. And this is bring an idea to life at work is the most important thing. So curiosity is not just having ideas, it's having ideas and then do something with it. Curiosity for me is growth mindset in action. It's an action verb. And curious people just do something with it. It's not about speaking languages or having friends or having talents, but it's about having ideas. And that's how are we kind of playing with that as learning and development, as organizations, probably the question. Now, when we're talking about individual curiosity, I'm using 3 different applications of curiosity. First of all, which is cognitive curiosity, which is a typical definition of curiosity, interest in stuff, in nature, in it. I've added 2 dimensions. One is empathic curiosity, interested in the other, and self-reflective curiosity, interest in myself, my beliefs, my purpose. It's probably the most difficult one, because we have 2 eyes to watch the world. We don't have any eyes to watch ourselves inside, and who we think we are is not necessarily who we are in reality, of course. This is a definition every person I'm asking has a different definition. This is the definition I came up with. I tried to create a definition that fits not only people, but also systems. Because teams can be curious, organizations can be curious, even societies can be curious, or not. So curiosity is a mindset to challenge the status quo, explore, discover, and learn. And I think what Simon was talking about, that learning and the neuroscience and learning, I'd like to add one thing to that. If people are in a curious mindset, they're open up their entire brain to learn anything, even not the thing that they're learning. So remember when we were with a history teacher who was really great, we were actually spilling that interest also in the next mathematics class or whatever was coming afterwards. So if people are in a curious mode, they want to learn more and they learn anything about it. Okay. 3 concepts to probably to remember. Awareness, intentionality, and measurement. Awareness is all about how aware am I of myself, of my for instance, by my learning. When is curiosity at its peak? When people know nothing, then they can't be really curious. If you don't know what you don't know, you're not going to ask any questions about it. If you know a little bit about something, you start becoming curious. And this is where the area of curiosity is, the wonder. And then the moment people, when they think they know too much, this curiosity starts coming down. There's research in North America that seasoned doctors, old doctors, 40, 50, 60-year-old doctors, are not as good as diagnosing patients when compared to 30-year-old doctors, because they think they know it all. And they're trying to compare their diagnosis with cases they had in the past, and they stop asking questions that this might be something different. And think about it also as experienced learning and development people. The danger is that it goes down, or as experienced managers or experienced leaders. Microsoft has done a great thing. They changed their culture from a know-it-all to a learn-it-all culture, celebrating learning and not knowing. And I think that's a great example here. And then, am I judging or am I curious when I have a customer in front of me and doing learning, when I'm a leader? Because for me, the opposite of curiosity is conformity. Conformity is a given. Conformity gives us peace of mind, gives us stability, gives us reassurance. And we always have that. Curiosity is the electric band that we need energy to move away from that curiosity. And when we pull a little bit, we explore our known world, our specialization, our the things that we know. When we pull more, we're discovering something completely new. Then we're going to explore new territories. We're going to read new things that we never heard of before. One of the suggestions I have often when people ask me how can I be wildly curious is I say, buy the book next to the book that you want to buy. You know? Let serendipity slip in and maybe you'll discover something new. Intentionality. Intentionality is the opposite of leaving things to chance. And I've seen it a lot in grown-up companies. And that's why I love so much Simon's example. At Novartis, curiosity is intentional. It's put on the radar. And by putting on the radar, you do something with it. Every company will have their own definition, their own approach to curiosity. But if you put it, in an intentional framework, things will happen much faster. And intentionality at the empathic level I think is beautiful when you don't like somebody, is to actually try to get to know the person. Because you're looking to that person from your filter and maybe being curious. How many problems in society could we solve, I think, no? If we're all a bit more curious about each other. And then if you're a leader, try to be aware, intentional, and measure double. For instance, reverse feedback. I found in my research, in my questionnaires, that for the first-line managers, about 23% is asking for reverse feedback. So 77% don't. They're not asking, how am I doing, their employee. Middle managers, it moves up to roughly 46%. So you would say there's a bit more mature people. And then for senior leaders, how much do you think it is? 0. Which company are you? It's slightly higher. What do you think? 5%. It's actually 6%. You're close. Of senior leaders asking, in grown-up companies I'm talking about. Startups, different ballgame. I don't have enough startups yet in my data set. And then measurement. And one way of measuring is like what Simon did. Another way of measuring at an individual level, I designed a diagnostic. It's available in 8 languages where people are doing a 10-minute analysis online, and they get their own report around what is my cognitive curiosity, what is my empathic, and what is my self-reflective curiosity. And that primes people to do something about it. And I also have an organizational diagnostic, and it's very interestingly that actually every company has something great to show for when they're thinking carefully about curiosity. We've all been startups. We all have great dimensions that we're doing, whether it's in learning or it's in recruitment or something, but we're creating limiting barriers for ourselves. For instance, internal processes and practices. If we promote people, do we promote them because they're conformists, or do we promote them because of their curiosity? In many organizations, I'm doing often cases, in many organizations they say we actually promote for conformity. We should promote for curiosity, but we don't really do it. Or innovation mindset, exceptions of failures, culture of openness, those type of things. Okay, and that's a book coming out on Monday. Buy 2 books, The Curiosity Advantage and mine, and I'd love to have your feedback. Shall we get into some questions, I hope?
We shall. So just like you said, so just like we said earlier, the question is the answer. So how many questions do you have? Who have some questions here for Simon and Stefaan? Let's see if anyone would like to come over here.
How did I do for time?
Thank you. This was really fascinating, and I am curious if a leader is fostering curiosity mindset really well. What are they doing for their teams and organizations they lead?
Yep, I can start.
Yeah.
So a leader is really important in it. So a leader can absolutely make or break it. So I'll answer the other way around first and then give you some tips. So we did some research looking at the impact the leader has on the team and whether the team rates their leader as favourable or unfavourable. And what we found was the difference between a favourable leader and an unfavourable leader was an 18-point difference in the engagement. So not surprisingly, unfavourable leader, 18-point drop. But actually where it was the greatest was curiosity. There's a 22-point difference in curiosity. So a leader can completely kill the curiosity in the team. And the things they would do to kill it, so I'll answer it that way around first, would be if you're trying something out and it doesn't work, do you say, great, what are we going to learn from that? Or do you come down hard, that failed, I'm going to penalise you. If you do that, people aren't going to take risks, they're not going to try things again. If someone asks a question, why are you asking that stupid question, then people aren't going to feel the psychological safety. So flipping that around, what can a leader do? Create the psychological safety in the team, encourage people to take smart risks and support them if those risks don't pay off, and most of all, probably ask questions. If you're a curious leader, if you're asking questions of the team, and if you're also showing your own vulnerability, I don't know the answer to this, what does everyone think? You're creating the opportunity and the space for the team to be able to actually be curious and also the other piece around linking it back to learning is also share what you're learning. So share, I didn't know that, I've been learning this, show that you're vulnerable to actually not knowing all the answers. And in the fast-moving world, in the ambiguity, no one's going to have all the answers. So actually creating that culture where people can ask questions, can speak openly, can share, and across a diverse team as well, all of that will create greater curiosity. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'd probably add two little things, if you don't mind, Sarah. Is the confident humility I spoke about. And it's very hard for people in power to be confidently humble. And the example role. I've also done some research about the learning behavior of managers and the learning behavior of their teams. If the manager learns a lot, the team will learn a lot. Linearly. If the manager does not learn anything, is not interested, is not talking about a Harvard Business Review article or a YouTube or something, the team's learning behavior will also be zero. So it's, and often it's good enough to prime managers and give them those data. And because they don't know, often we don't give them enough coaching and suddenly they have this aha moment and they run with it.
Brilliant. We've got another question over here.
Thank you very much. This was extremely insightful. So I've got kind of a specific question. In my role, one of my main responsibilities is training our revenue teams, those that are going and getting new business, those that are supporting existing customers on product updates and new products that are launching. When you're training someone how to use or sell a specific software, how would you promote curiosity in that environment, I suppose?
Yeah, I can start. So Spencer Harrison, who I mentioned, made the link. He worked as a professor at INSEAD. He made the link between curiosity and innovation. What he also did was some research looking at curiosity and performance, and he worked with, I think it's Etsy in the US, and looked at the curiosity of salespeople, and he invoked curiosity with various sort of nudges throughout the day, and those that were more curious actually ended up selling more. So and how they did that, I guess, was through asking more questions of customers, being more curious to listen to the customer. Some of the data that we had around, actually, if you're curious, you listen better, you make better decisions. So even at a micro level, you're making decisions throughout the day. So if you're curious of thinking, what's going to be best out of this and this, in a sales context, that's going to lead to probably better decisions, therefore more sales. If you're listening better to the customer, you're going to pick up on more things, and that will play through. So several different ways, I guess, that it can do it, but the research certainly seems to show that actually if you're more curious, it will have an impact on your performance, and that works in the sales environment as well. There's also a number of anecdotal pieces of people saying, actually, I always try and hire curious salespeople because I find that they perform better or whatever, but that's less research-based and more anecdotal. Yeah.
Super. I'll pick up on it later, but let's have some more people.
Okay, any more questions? Let me have a look.
Thank you both. Great presentation. I'm curious about the statistic you mentioned around the 26 or 19 or 26% in skill sets would be lost over the next 3 years. To help me picture that, I'm wondering, have you got any thoughts around the 1 in 5 or 1 in 4 skill sets that we had 3 years ago that we no longer use? Because I think that helps crystallise what kind of change looks like. Yeah,
so I guess if you look at it from the context of something like technology skills that are moving so quickly. So if I was learning cloud computing today, would that still be relevant in 3 years' time, probably at the speed that it's moving? So What we see is a difference between the softer skills that are moving much slower and then the technical skills that are moving faster and faster. So that 26% is going to be far more likely on the technical skills side than the soft skills side, which is also a consideration when you're actually investing your time in learning a skill. You need to have both, but actually if you invest it in so the softer skills, management, leadership, etc., that's likely to be still there in many years' time. But yeah, many of the things more on the technical skill, actually those are moving so quickly that they would be expiring faster. So yeah.
Often it's linked to AI and the new dream of computers, what they're happening. If you're looking at what is going to happen to jobs, apparently there's going to be about 12% new jobs around. 75% of our jobs will be enhanced, and about 13% of our jobs will just be lost. I'd encourage you to go to this beautiful website. What is it? willcomputerstakemyjob.com. Do you know the site? And you can fill out your job. I'm a instructional designer, or I'm an accountant, and they will give a prediction of what percentage likelihood it will be that you're take another job. Actually, we're quite lucky in the learning and development group, but for some jobs like accountants and legal assistants, they need to be part of that stream of new skills, which is also beautiful if you're embracing it, if you're not afraid of it.
We've got a question over that side.
Hello. Hello. I just wonder whether any research has been done on specific leadership behaviours that may engender curiosity or deter people.
So I guess building a bit on before, so the psychological safety is a very big one. So the whole piece that Amy Edmondson talks about of creating that safety to be able to question, to experiment, to share one's views, to talk openly, all of that is supported by curiosity and fosters curiosity. So as a leader, if you can be sharing that you don't know the answer, role modeling, learning, role modeling, asking questions and your own curiosity, that will then reflect through onto the team as well. So, yeah.
I think the power of data is very important there. When I'm asking leaders whether curiosity is a good thing for an organization to invest in, 90% say yes, of course. When I'm asking them a follow-up question, would you invite innovation into your team, then only 50% of the people say yes. And I think that shows that we're not really sure as managers whether we should allow for exploitation, continuing all the stuff that we've been doing forever, or that we should be inviting exploration. And I think really good managers, they know when to allow for exploration and curiosity, and when to say, oh, guys and girls, now we're into action. And exploration is really beautiful in the beginning. But we all know, we're also always very eager to get into the action immediately, and that we don't take that time. And often I'm also noticing with managers, is that managers say, I'll be the curious person. And everybody else is there to do their job. And that's the type of the managers who prefer more B players rather than, and it's not very difficult to train people, I think, into priming to give people that understanding how they behave and give them a mirror somehow.
And that element of relinquishing control.
Yeah.
There's also a piece around the questions that you ask of the team as well. So Lisa Bedell talks about killer questions of how do you ask really, really good questions that invoke people to really think and push boundaries as well. So rather than, how would we do this? It's in 3 years' time, we were recognized globally for doing this. What was it that we did? So reframing essentially the same question into something that sets people thinking far more ambitious, far more curiously around what the answer might actually be. And as a leader, then that's definitely something you can be doing. Yeah.
Oh, we've got lots coming up here.
The leadership is really important. Also, what our friend from INSEAD, Spencer Harrison, he found in working at CEOs, is that if CEOs and their teams, and I think you spoke a bit about it, are curious, they're not only good at exploring the new, inviting the future, they're also good at improving the present. So it's not only a futuristic thing only. It's also about making sure that your present operation, and can we change this in continuous improvement, and do I invite it, yes or no? Sorry.
You can hear me okay?
Yep.
What I find, we're embarking on some of these. I lead a learning and development group at a pharma company. And we're embarking on a lot of things like this, inspired by a lot of this work that's coming up. I find we get tremendous support at the senior management level. They dive in and say, yes, we love it, go to it. And then we have, at the individual contributor level, we have, I'm drawn to the enthusiastic. You use the enthusiastic people to help spread your message.
Yep.
But sometimes I find there's a communication gap at the frontline manager
Yep.
level. Maybe they get distracted by the business, they get distracted by maybe their own advancement, et cetera. So I just kind of wonder, that's a big part of my thinking right now, is how to manage that group.
Well,
right?
What I've seen is that what the companies, and maybe pharma is different, is that it does not, typically first line managers are quite okay about it. It's the middle managers. When I'm asking middle managers, they're 4 times less ready to say that curiosity is a good thing when compared to senior guys and the first line managers. Because, of course, they've been given marching orders by their seniors, and it's an efficiency game. They're not interested to change the sheets in portrait form, in format, or to come up with great suggestions, because it's career limiting very often, no?
We both have sort of enterprise diagnostics, and it shows that leaders think organizations are curious, associates think organizations are curious, middle management doesn't think the organization is as curious, so that there is that blockage there. And when we look within Novartis at what are the barriers for people learning, actually I don't have time and my manager doesn't support me are the 2 biggest pieces. And I don't have time is around a prioritization piece to some degree, and I always use the example of if we tie people's bonuses to their learning hours, people would probably find the time to be spending more time learning. So therefore there is a prioritization, as well as there is a lot going on as well. But my manager doesn't support me absolutely backs up what you're saying. So yeah,
that's true. I've also seen that.
Yep.
Okay, over here in the center.
This morning we talked about desk-based and deskless workers, and about deskless workers being the majority of the workforce. I wondered, how does curiosity play into deskless workers, and how can you enhance curiosity at that level?
Good question. It's maybe a bit the A players or the B players I spoke about, and you also have C players, but we're not necessarily covering them. A players are not necessarily, it's not necessarily their personality trait. There's also an environmental influence. If the environment is curious, helping me to be curious, then I'll also be more curious. Of course, on the base of being curious myself. So as an organization and as learning professionals, we can actually work on both areas. We can train people on becoming more curious, building a growth mindset, for instance. And I think that's a missing piece in a lot of the learning and development strategies in many companies, that we're focusing on primary skills, core skills, production skills, processes. We focus on behaviors, but we don't focus on habits. Because if a person is not curious, we blame it on the recruitment. Because we don't have any courses for that person. Now, a number of companies are moving beyond this. For instance, I found in looking at McKinsey or Fiskars or other companies, their leadership programs, they start off with a self-reflection journey. So it's more about self-reflection, because traditional leadership development was outside in. Learn a bit about strategy, about operations, about finance, and they say that's good, but they can read books, but we're going to tell them about their own values and their own individual purpose. And that's going to be the basis for them to grow on. And for instance, the Fiskars group is now saying, we want that for everybody. And that's kind of self-awareness as a great stepping stone to be curious. So that's more, and then other companies are saying, we want to focus on the nurture part, not necessarily nature, and we're going to create, and I think Novartis is a beautiful example there, is making sure that we have the environment. that we don't have 120 LMSs, that we have one system, and that we have learning democratized. Anybody can have access to any of our stuff. We don't have, I don't know about you guys, but some companies have said, we don't have leadership courses anymore. If people feel like it, they can go it. Often we have this distinction between director above and director below, and they're treated like different animals. That's not a very good example, I think.
And depending on what you mean by deskless, I guess if it's virtual working, then we've got
I misunderstood.
We've got no data to back up that there's any difference in curiosity between people working virtually. There is a dependency to what Stefan was saying on technology, so that would be an element to make sure people are still connected. But I've not seen anything that indicates that virtual working would be different to sort of desk-based working from a
I misunderstood. There is a
That's not what I meant.
No, okay.
I meant with mechanics.
Got you. Okay. So access. So from an access perspective, I see a difference there. So from manufacturing, for example, access to technology to be curious is a barrier, and one that we've not fully managed to solve yet. So.
I misunderstood. I think for blue collars, often they're more sensitive to the environment. And I've seen that they often say that my environment is not allowing me to even ask questions, let alone learning, because my boss is really top down. And those people are extremely curious in their private space, because the company is not inviting them into coming up with ideas. And I think curiosity is possible at any single level of people coming up with, but it's kind of, again, this intentionality. How do we employ it across the organization? Great question. Nigel.
Go ahead.
I can shout.
I can speak louder.
I think that second criteria, which was unbossed, you haven't talked about it, and I think it's actually really important. Because if you've got a bureaucracy that makes you get 5 signatures to buy a book, then it just kills curiosity dead. So I'd like you to talk about what does that mean for, I'm in Novartis. How would unbossed manifest itself in a way that would encourage my curiosity?
So just for those who don't know, so inspired, curious, unbossed is our culture, and the principle around unbossed is essentially building on servant leadership. So it's to the pyramid shift that we talked about there. It's no longer that the leader should always know the answer, and then the leader tells everyone what to do, but much more the leader is there to take away the blockers for the team, to empower the team, to create the dynamics so that we can have honest, open conversations and be able to figure out the best way forward. So then when you apply that into learning, so as an example, approvals for learning, so we've taken away pretty much all of the approvals, I think, now for learning content. So certainly all of our catalogues are open access. Everyone has access to licenses, whereas it used to be nomination only for leadership programs, for etc. Leadership programs now open to all of our leaders. You can sign up, you can put it on. Other things where we've taken a sort of unboxed lens on making a decision, so the learning hours, one question that comes up a lot is how do you track all the informal learning hours? You say, well, we trust people, so we will provide a tracker where people can go in and put their learning hours in. Previously, if I'd taken a book, I would have to put it into the system and it would have gone to my boss to say, did Simon spend 8 hours reading this book? And it's like, is that really an unbossed culture of my manager saying, yes, I confirm he did read this book, and I'll spend 2 minutes in the system doing that. So things like that, we just took all of that away. So a lot of approvals, a lot of bureaucracy, I guess, and process in there around accessing learning is all taken out. And then the other piece which ties a bit to the unbossed piece was the slide at the beginning that talked about why are we going big on learning and being curious to attract and retain talent and support the skills of the business. That attract and retain talent is all about curiosity, but it's all around being unbossed to be curious about what you want to be curious about. So if I want to learn something that's not directly linked to my role, I've got access to all the learning resources to do it. We support the time to do it, and people can spend the time to go and do that. So I'm unbossed, I'm empowered to be able to learn about the things that I want to learn, maybe for my next role, maybe just because I'm interested. And our CEO talks about that. He references David Epstein's book, Range, around how if you've got a broad knowledge of diverse subjects, you can actually bring that in. And some of his major breakthroughs he refers to around he was in a completely different discipline, learning about something unconnected, and suddenly there was the aha moment, and he could bring that back into what he's learning. So it's applying that unbossed approach to curiosity, say, learn what you want to be learning, we'll provide you access to fantastic learning resources, we'll try and remove as many barriers as we can to it, and then you can take advantage of it. So, yeah, thanks, Nigel.
I have a question about reporting, because looking at the slides, I had a bit of mixed emotions when I saw the numbers of hours that people have been learning. And I think as learning and professionals, we know that learning is much more than sitting behind a laptop and doing e-learning. But yes, we have an educational role to which the rest of the business to break down that paradigm.
Yep.
And my concern is if we report these kind of KPIs,
yep,
you get my point, probably.
I absolutely get your point, and my team will be laughing because we have this discussion regularly about the validity of learning hours. And the analogy that someone used, which I think is helpful, is it's like an airline and the number of passengers. So an airline and the number of passengers it carries doesn't tell you whether they're profitable, doesn't tell you if the business is running well, but it's a pretty helpful indicator that actually if all the other metrics are okay, then it's going to tell you that they're doing well. So if the flights are being priced at the right thing, they're being 90% full, everything else is running smoothly, then more passengers equals more profitability and everything else. And for us, it's the same. Learning hours, if people are spending more time learning, if all the other metrics are lined up, that it's good content, it's aligned to the business strategy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then it's a helpful indicator. But you're absolutely right. We go round in circles of, is it helpful, isn't it helpful? And we've concluded it is helpful and it gives us a good trajectory over time, but you need a whole load of other metrics behind it to know all of those things as well. Otherwise, if you just use that metric, not helpful at all. And yeah, we've had that discussion quite a lot. Thank you for the question.
Absolutely. I think engagement are beautiful metrics. Or after action review checking. I think that's something that we as learning and development people are often not even touching, organizational learning, because we're focusing all every time on the individual. How often do we do after action reviews? And it's learning and development, maybe coaching the business to drive that. And that's a great metric. But yeah, I'm with you on the cool.
Some great conversations, and I think we've got time for one more question. Was it over here somewhere?
Thank you. Hi, so I work for quite a small company, and we've got a great culture, and we keep a lot of our team, for a long time. But obviously, being such a small company, it's very hard to for them to progress, quickly and things like that. So the stat about after 3 years in a role, curiosity is basically gone. I just wondered if you had any tips on how to keep that alive, because we give them the learning, we give them development days once a month and things like that, but actually if they're not curious because they're stagnating a little bit in their role, how can we help?
Okay, there's actually an add-on to the 3-year. After 5 years, the statistics show that it becomes positive slightly more. But it's a false positive. Because if you correlate it to asking new questions and being open, it's even more negative. But people say they're happier at that time. But if you're in a small company, typically people have a full view of what's happening end to end. They often have an opportunity to do multiple projects. So, for instance, I was talking to Carol earlier, Deloitte. Deloitte, people are moving from projects to project. And they might be beyond 3 years to be an assistant analyst or whatever title they may have. PepsiCo for me is a great example about this part-time marketplace. Like even if you need that person to do X, but if you allow a certain percentage of that person's time to say, okay, why don't you go explore something else? And here's a list of options. And we only need 4 hours of a week of your time. If you're really ready to stick out your neck, go for it. Or I think what Simon just mentioned, not only allowing training for the current role, but also the next role. People sticking out their neck and saying, oh, maybe I might be doing something else 1 year from now, and I'm going to get this certification, or I'm personally interested, and the company provides this stuff for me. Isn't that great? Some companies are even providing stuff for the families to help with, and I think all these small steps, I think is more a matter of creativity on our part more than, and of course HR, also job rotation is HR issues. Does it give you some ideas, Simon?
Yeah, the lens I put on it to a bit is maybe the stats we looked at around skills. So if you got a quarter of your skills going, half of people learnt new to world skills, then in that role, what are the new skills that you should be learning and what are the things you should be no longer doing? So how do you apply curiosity into evolving that role, even if it's theoretically the same role? If your competitors are learning new skills and bringing new approaches, then actually standing still and treating it as the same role for 3 years maybe isn't the right way either. So how do you apply curiosity to evolve it and constantly improve it, bringing new skills to bear? Maybe it's not exactly the same role then after 3 years because you've been able to bring improvements to it. So.
Thank you both, and I'm sure you'll all agree with me that this was a really insightful session. So I'd like you to take a moment to say thank you.